Good morning, students. We have started the 11th chapter, Light, Shadows and Reflections. In the last class, we have discussed about luminous and non-luminous objects, transparent, translucent and opaque objects, etc. Now, let us discuss the most interesting topic of this chapter, or the most interesting topic of the science subject of class 6th. Okay, that is pinhole camera. Why it is most interesting, you will be coming to know after once it is explained. Okay. So for your better understanding and for the convenience of your easy learning, I have given the definition of pinhole camera in two different forms. One is simple definition, another one is elaborated definition. Anyhow, since you are class 6th students, let us go with simple definition first. What is pinhole camera? A box made simple camera without any lens but with a tiny hole or aperture on its one side and a translucent screen on its other side. Pinhole camera is a box made simple camera without any lens but with a tiny hole or aperture on its one side and a translucent screen on its other side. Pinhole camera is a box made simple camera without any lens. Lens is not there, but what is present? But with a tiny hole or aperture. Tiny means very small. Hole or aperture. So tiny hole. If you make a hole with the end of a pin, how much sized hole is going to be formed? Very small hole is going to be formed. That is what called tiny hole or aperture. So this box made camera is not having any lens but a tiny hole or a pinhole is present on its one side. So on this box, on its one side, there is a tiny hole or aperture or a pinhole and a translucent screen like tracing paper. Translucent screen means you can see the other side of the screen but not clearly. So that is what translucent screen. Why? That screen, it allows the light to pass through it only partially. So we can see the objects through the translucent screen but not clearly. So this box made simple camera is having what? On one side, a small, very small hole. On the other side, translucent screen is present. Remember these things. And what is absent? No lens. There is no lens. Lens is absent. But what are present? On one side, a tiny hole, and on other side, a translucent screen. Example for translucent screen is tracing paper. It is available in many bookshops. Elaborated definition for pinhole camera. Same thing we are going to discuss, but we are going to learn the functions of those two things. What are those two things that are present in pinhole camera? Tiny hole and translucent screen. Right? So let us see this definition, elaborated definition. A box-made camera without any lens but with a tiny hole or aperture on its one side. For what purpose this tiny hole is present? To focus the reflected light rays falling from the outer objects. So this tiny hole is basically meant for focusing the reflected light rays falling from the outer objects. So whenever light is falling on any object, some amount of light is absorbed and remaining amount of light is reflected back. What is reflection? That also we have learned in the first class itself of this chapter. In the first class, that is in yesterday's class, we have learned what is reflection. So when light falls on any object, some amount of light is absorbed and remaining amount of light is reflected back. So this reflected light is coming from the outer objects in the form of light rays, and that light rays that are coming from the outer object, they enter into the pinhole camera through its pinhole, right? So the tiny hole or aperture is to focus the reflected light, to focus the reflected light rays which are falling from the outer objects. Okay, right? And as we discussed, this camera is containing what? Along with the tiny hole, a translucent screen on the other side of the box. So tiny hole, we have learned the purpose. To focus the reflected light rays falling from the outer objects. That is the purpose of tiny hole. And what is the purpose of the translucent screen? It is to capture an inverted image. Inverted image means upside down image formed by the falling of reflected light rays from the outer object through pinhole. As the reflected light rays are focused through pinhole, they fall on the translucent screen that is present on the other side of the pinhole camera. As the reflected light rays, they are falling on the translucent screen, an inverted image is formed on the translucent screen. Inverted image of what? Inverted image of outer objects. Okay, so the translucent screen is mainly meant for what? To capture the inverted image which is formed by the falling of reflected light rays from the outer object through the pinhole. So the elaborated definition goes like this. A box-made camera without any lens but with a tiny hole or aperture on its one side to focus the reflected light rays falling from the outer objects, and a translucent screen on the other side of the box to capture the inverted image formed by the falling of reflected light rays from the outer object through pinhole. Right. So we have learned the definition. But how to construct this pinhole camera and how to use this pinhole camera and what are the properties of pinhole images? Let us go through it. Construction of pinhole camera and its usage. First, slightly different sized two rectangular boxes have to be taken. We are using two rectangular boxes and they should not be equal in their size. They must be slightly different in their size. And it must be ensured that as they are slightly different in size, one is smaller one, another one is little larger one. And it must be ensured that the smaller box should slide into the larger box without any gap between them. So you are choosing such type of boxes wherein the smaller box should slide into the larger box without making any gap between them. After taking the two boxes, one smaller and another larger box, one side of each box should be cut open. See, this is two sides. On each box, one side is removed, cut opened sides. The other side is closed sides. These are closed sides. Third step. A tiny hole or aperture has to be made exactly in the middle of the closed opposite face of the larger box. Assume that this is the larger box and already you have cut open on one side. The other side is closed. So here, exactly in this closed face, exactly in the middle, you are going to make one tiny hole or aperture, right? So this box is larger box. So in the larger box on the closed side, exactly in the middle, one tiny hole has to be made. A tiny hole or aperture has to be made exactly in the middle of the closed opposite side of the larger box. Next, coming to the smaller box. So whatever the work that has to be done for larger box, you have already done. You have cut open on one side and on another closed side exactly in the center of the larger box, you have made a tiny hole. So smaller box, what you are going to do? Already you have cut open one side of the smaller box also. The other side, you are going to do some work. What is that work? A square of about 5 to 6 centimeters should be cut and removed from the middle of the closed opposite face of the smaller box. So for larger box, you have made a tiny hole or pinhole on the in the middle of the closed opposite face. Whereas here in the smaller box, you are making a square square cut like this. Okay, square cut. And the size of this square cut will be around 5 to 6 centimeters. Sir, it is not 5 to 6 centimeters, it is very small. This is only model here. Okay, if this cut itself is 5 to 6 centimeters, then how much size paper that I have to use to write these notes? Okay, it is very difficult. So I have just used the model. So the square that has to be cut out from the closed opposite face of the smaller box is about 5 to 6 centimeters. After removing that 5 to 6 centimeter square cut, what you are going to do? You are going to cover that square cut with a tracing paper. So this is, see here it is fully open. Here a translucent paper. By using a translucent paper, you have covered this square cut. So the open square covered with tracing paper in the smaller box. Okay, right. So in the larger box, in the closed opposite face, exactly in the middle, a small hole has been made. In the smaller box, in the closed opposite face, exactly in the middle, about 5 to 6 centimeters of square cut has been made, and that tiny hole in the larger box, it was left as hole itself. But here in the smaller box, that 5 to 6 centimeters square cut, it is covered with tracing paper in the smaller box. So keeping the tracing paper side in the inner side, the smaller box can be slid inside the larger box towards pinhole. See, keeping the tracing paper side in the inner side. So the smaller box has got two sides, one open and one closed. So in that closed one, you have covered the square cut with the tracing paper. So keeping this tracing paper side in the inner side of larger box, the smaller box can be slid. The smaller box can be slid inside the larger box towards the pinhole of the larger box. So this smaller box can be, so you must be able to slide this smaller box inside this larger box. In that, how you are keeping the smaller box? This tracing paper side you are keeping inner side, and open side you are keeping outer side. Okay, so by keeping the tracing paper side in the inner side, the smaller box can be slid inside the larger box towards this pinhole. Okay, now once this setup is ready, the pinhole camera is ready. Then how to use this pinhole camera, in the 6th point it is explained. The observer can view or watch the captured inverted image of the outer object on the translucent screen or tracing paper of the smaller box through the open side of the smaller box. So from here you can see the inverted image that is formed on the tracing paper. Okay, so light falls through the pinhole and you can see the image on the screen through this open side of the smaller box. Okay, but how directly you are going to do like that? No. Before watching it, you will cover your head as well as the pinhole camera with a black cloth. With a piece of black cloth, you will cover your head as well as the pinhole camera, and then you will observe the inverted image formed on the translucent screen. Okay, through the open side of the smaller box. The outer objects that are to be captured, their images through pinhole camera, must be in bright sunshine. If you think that you can get the images of the outer objects during the night time or when there is very dull sunlight, then it is going to be little bit difficult or impossible. When can you capture the inverted images of the outer objects on the translucent screen of a pinhole camera? When the outer objects are in bright sunshine, then only it is possible. The outer objects that are to be captured, their images through pinhole camera must be in bright sunshine. Next, the smaller box has to be moved forward or backward until the observer gets a picture on the translucent screen pasted or captured at the other end. Okay, right. The smaller box has to be moved forward or backward. Why? At what point the image is going to be captured on the translucent screen, we don't know. Until we get that image, the smaller box has to be moved forward or backward. What are the properties of pinhole images? Pinhole images are different from shadows. They are not like shadows. Shadows do not give colors of the objects. Pinhole images show the colors of the objects on the other side. And shadows are direct, erect, straight. Pinhole images are upside down or inverted. Pinhole images are different from shadows. Pinhole images show the colors of the objects. The pinhole images are upside down or inverted. These are the properties of the pinhole images. Okay, thank you.